At first, rescuers thought it was a doll. Then, that doll moved. In a grassy pasture strewn with toys, splintered lumbers, and bricks, tossed to and fro. In a tornado's widespread wrath, 11-month-old Kyson Stowell was laying face down in mud 150 yards from the home that he lived in that once stood. It looked like a baby doll, said David Harmon, a firefighter who had already crossed the cornfields twice looking for survivors. Then he checked for a pulse. He was lying motionless and suddenly took a breath and started crying. Last week, our country was hit by tornadoes in Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama. And I was thinking about this baby this week after I read about that. And I was thinking about here, this baby is alone in a puddle. And if he would have stayed alone in that puddle, that baby would have died. But God raised up a firefighter like Ryan wants to be. And through that firefighter's work, he picks up the baby. And think, just some scratches, 150 yards in the air. Sadly, his mother died. But they've called this like the baby of hope for the South. That through all of the devastation, yet there is a miracle. In a lot of ways, the people of Israel and Judah, and especially in the north now, Israel, that country was going down a devastation. The best days of Israel were clearly over. In fact, the northern kingdom was now disintegrating. The tornado of political weakness had now ravished the north, where you could just see they were getting beaten by their foes. They were getting weaker and weaker because they had not served the Lord. Now, one of those examples of this was the king of Aram. And he was one of the attackers of Israel. He was one to bring infliction upon Israel, and he had a problem. How are you going to win a war if your enemy always has your playbook? Maybe you could call Belichick and find out something about that. And this is what we read. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. The man of God is Elisha. Well, the king, he thinks, I'm going to solve this problem. Find who the traitor is and get rid of him now. Which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go, find where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. So the king, supported by a strong army, will take no chances when they're going to capture this Elisha. I mean, think of it. One prophet. Strong army, one prophet. What's that? Just, send a couple guys over there and get them. Strong army. Then he sent chariots and horses and chariots with a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots surrounded the city. Take the perspective of the servant. He goes outside and he sees an army and finds out, we want you, Elisha. But who's around Elisha? Waking up to possible disaster. Oh, my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid. the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Say what? Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Yeah, I heard you. What do you mean? There's another army, a supporting army from heaven. Elisha prayed, "Oh Lord, open this guy's eyes. He's not seen the big picture, so he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses, of chariots of fire all around Elisha. Okay, so picture this. We've got the army of the Arameans, and then we have the army of God. The army of Arameans, have some spears and a few chariots, and, the army of God, fire of chariots, the power of God surrounding Elisha. Well, how did the army of God fight? Well, they inflict blindness. As the enemies came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike these people with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. So the army of God vanquishes the foes. Strike these people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, "This is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to Samaria. They entered the city. Elisha said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see." Whoa. Ouch. Samaria. The perfect victory. The Lord opened their eyes. They looked, and there they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked, "Elisha, shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them?" "Do not kill them," he answered. "Would you kill men you have captured with your sword or bow? Hey, these are surrendered men. Instead, give them a blessing. Set food and water before them so they may eat and drink and go back to their master." So they prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away. They returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. I was thinking about that baby alone. Alone. Can you imagine what it's like to be alone? Alone. It's a rainy, muddy night. A tornado has killed your mother. The house is destroyed. And this baby doesn't even know the gravity of what it's like to be alone, without help. And yet, if we think about our lives, if we think about who we are, if we are outside of God, we are truly alone. And God has put in our lives an army of support. And in this passage, there's every time we do a Bible reading plan, I've actually picked this passage if it was my turn. This is like my third sermon. This might be like I probably preached on this one passage in this church more than any other, I thought. Because every time I read this passage, it's like the Lord puts another specific meaning to this, and you see other things. And in this passage, you see how we are all connected, and there is something powerful about the army of each other. And this army extends and goes greater and greater to it even includes God himself, who's our support system. I think about home discipleship, and I think about each of us. Every child here is not alone. You have father and mother. You're not alone. Children, parents, grandparents. Psalm 68, verse 6. God sets the lonely in families. You are not alone. There is more. And I was thinking about that even with the king of Israel. I mean, in some ways, he was a wicked man. It says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. But he was not alone. There was a prophet, Elisha. And that Elisha went out of his way to tell him that the king of Aram was going to attack. You're not alone when you have a friend, the Bible says. I have seen some of the most interesting and encouraging friendships among the young people in this church. I say interesting because they're so dynamic. And encouraging because I have seen you young people support each other as friends. And I have told that some of the stories, without mentioning names, if I'm on other places of the country, because we're community. If one falls down, Ecclesiastes 4:10, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls down and no one to help him up. So if we think about our lives, there's us alone. But God gives us families. God gives us friends. God gives us, many of us have spouses. What a partnership. We're not alone. Exodus 4, verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses, and he was about to kill him. Ooh, would that be a bummer? Think about that. He's alone. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord left him alone. Now that to me is one of the most striking examples of a kingdom partnership. Moses did not want to do home discipleship. And what did Zipporah do? Come on, let's go. Let's get this done. It saved Moses' life. You know, I tell you, I have seen again and again with my wife that I will be in a kind of a foul mood on something. And it's like, I don't feel like this. Or, you know, and you know how sin operates? Sin gets you when you're alone. When you're isolated, you're too busy, you're burned out, you're just, you know, and you just kind of go down this certain trail. And you know what I have seen in my wife, she just steps up and if she sees me in a funk, and she'll just say, okay, buddy, okay, everybody, let's do our home discipleship. Or what's wrong, Henry? Nothing. What's wrong? Nothing. Have you ever had that conversation? Nothing's wrong. Something's wrong. No, nothing's wrong. Something's wrong. And then it comes out. And husbands, to your wives. It's that you're not alone. There's more. I call it the marriage army, the marriage partnership. Well, there's church. And I'm just mentioning a few. I'll tell you, when Mrs. Schulte was on her deathbed and around her was people she loved and were praying, and the support of this church is bringing meals, and there's all this love is right there, and there, that support, that love. Let us not give up meeting as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Now, I'm talking about human things now. And I want us to understand that the human things are the things that we most connect to. We think about a family. We think about friends. We think about our spouses. We think about the church. We think about maybe other relationships. But this passage is not necessarily just about that, even though things like that are mentioned. This is about a support system that we probably don't even realize is happening. The hosts of God support us too. Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes so he may see." Then the Lord opened his eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. You are not alone. Your family is not alone. Have you ever gone through what you believe is some form of spiritual warfare where you just feel so like attacked one time after another? And you're saying, "Oh Lord, what should I do? What can I do?" We've all been like that. There's been times when Pam and I will have this often on a Saturday night because we have church the next morning. It's like any night. We can sleep like babies Sunday through Friday. And Saturday night, it's like this distraction and that interruption. And then we're tossing and turning. And we even had it sometimes where we're like, "Oh, boy, this is no good." So around 3 in the morning, we finally like, "Okay, Lord, help us." And we cry out to the Lord and say, "Lord, send your angels here and help us." And it is as if something changes. Now, I don't want to give formulas and everything like that, but I do believe that there's an unseen dimension of our walk, and we see that described all through the Bible. And even earlier, there was that vision about, oh, what should we do? They send a lion spirit, and that's a vision, that's a metaphor. Okay, well, it's hard for us to exactly know. But we see all the way through the Bible that behind the reality of what we see is a bigger reality, a greater reality. And behind that which is all we see are principalities and powers. And we hear about that in Ephesians chapter 6. Your fight is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and power. So put on the full armor of God. But understand this. You are covered by God. And not just here, but here in all eternity. You have come to Mount Zion. Now think about this spiritual support system. To the heavenly Jerusalem, to the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. Lord, open our eyes that we may see that we're not alone, that the forces of evil are not doing their worst against us, that our sin, our despair, our loneliness, all these things, in all these things, we still have hope. We can go further. But you have come to Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, to Jesus. Oh, okay. Who's around you? You've got your family. You've got your spouse. You've got the church. You've got friends. You have angels and hosts and all sorts of God's army around you. And that is, if that is not enough, there's one more who is around you that is the ultimate aid, support, salvation. You've come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, to the sprinkling of blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Who is around you? You are not alone. Everywhere you look, God is there. He's provided our earthly support, but that's not all. He's supplied his angels, but he has sent his own son, and his own son is around you, behind you, before you. He's your Savior. Who is supporting you? God. God. Life, salvation, forgiveness, renewal, hope, resurrection, eternal protection, love, fellowship, communion, now, forever. Just to name a few things. It says in the book of Hebrews, don't refuse him who speaks to you. Okay, you can live it alone. You can. You can live in your own strength. You can solve that problem in your way. Or you can open up your eyes and see the salvation that's coming from God. Open up your eyes. Well, the Arameans opened up their eyes too. After they were brought to Samaria. And they opened their eyes and they thought their death was certain. But instead, Elisha says, we're going to have an Old Testament feast. We're going to have some communion here. What? Put a banquet before us? That's how the armies of God fight. The armies of the evil one, how they fight is destroy, kill, carnage, rage, despair, isolation, loneliness, bitterness, lack of forgiveness. I mean, just the whole list goes on and on. That is how the armies of the evil one fights. But here's the armies of God. Fellowship, peace, have a meal together. And it says in the text that the Arameans stopped raiding Israel.